Right. As always, we're taking a few moments to settle in, to find a way of sitting that is comfortable, one that ultimately you can sustain. The the ideal posture, I suppose you could say, or perhaps I should say, excuse me. I'll start again. Posture that we aspire to be, as I'm sitting now, quite forward in my chair, slightly tilted, so that there's about 30% of my weight in my feet, feeling well supported through my legs, my hips, through the chair, of course. But the other aspect of support, as I've said recently, is to think about that area of the skeleton, the inner structure of our body, which has evolved to support us. And one of the things, of course, that we're constantly looking to do in Tai Chi is to make sure that the skeleton has a chance to do that. And that means being aware of the pull of gravity through your body and making sure that, for instance, we don't do this. I don't think anybody I can see here is doing that, but clearly, at this point, this is not a sustainable position. I'm going to start aching in my side and so on and so forth. So, where your feet are, where your hips are, with the space that they create, and that your weight can go down into that space. As I said, that means a slight angling forwards, which is different from the upright posture, from the standing posture that we would use. But it does allow for the front of the body to just hang slightly, which is something that we do want to try and feel in the standing posture. It's a little bit easier with this slight angle forwards. So the feeling of the standing and the seated is the same. The principles are the same, but how we reach those principles is slightly different because the environment is different. And we often use the term, particularly standing, we sit into our hips, and in a sense, you can sit in to these support mechanisms that are really part of our structure and how we move. So less need to strain in back and shoulders, for instance, and so on and so forth. It won't necessarily make the need, the tightness go away, the tension go away or automatically, but it's one step in that direction. Then rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. Hinge the sides. And the upper part of your chest. Belly. And finally, legs. And to get a feel for that quality of sitting, put your feet out, sit back in the chair, and let yourself drop back in to the chair. This is a familiar feeling for most of us, but we often don't give it due consideration. What is the effect on, say, our shoulders, our chest, when we do this? Does it change our breathing? Are there things that we can sort of relate to that we can then begin to look for in the upright stances? So we allow ourselves to sit, we allow ourselves to settle in. But even doing that, you may notice, it's possible, and I see people doing it, and I know I do it myself. We're sitting here nice and relaxed, and yet, Are you holding your hands in tight fists, for instance? You know, are you holding the shoulder tight? So these old habits are slow to releases. And actually, I think in many ways it's better to try and just concentrate on the more useful, the more skillful habits. So coming back up to the central position, and if you can be a long way forward, like I am, that's fine. But recognize that this is a strong posture to maintain on your back, and it's strong to move from. And you may see me halfway through the session slide back a bit to give my back a little bit more support. So don't feel that you're stuck in this position. And then just turning your head. Another thing to consider here is how we're moving. And are we habitually straining to move? There may be all sorts of reasons for that. Again, habits one way or another. But if once again we can take our attention more deeply in our body and get a sense that that's where we want to initiate the movement from, that's where our intent comes from, shall we say, that too can begin to develop better habits, more useful habits of movement. And we begin to find that the flow of the movement is a natural outcome from that. But if we try to flow, and this is particularly true when we get to the main set of exercises, everything will be focusing into our arms and our hands. So one of the reasons I go through these sort of joint exercises at the start isn't just about loosening the joints, important though that is. Place your hands on your shoulders now, and then pushing your elbows forwards. But also because they give us a very simple way of actually working out how we are doing the movement. Do we have this correct intention in the movement? And we recognize that there are kind of connections, that when we move our arms like this, our chest and upper back engage, maybe other parts of the body as well. Going forwards. Hands down to your sides and just winding your arms around. Again, you feel what's happening in chest and upper back, sides. And then winding around. And back the other way. Gesture. Tilt forward. So now more of your weight going in to your feet. And this is where we get a chance to both work out how we can move, and the movement comes from hips and from feet rather than being initiated in, say, our shoulders. Our upper body follows the transfer of the weight. And significantly, coming back, we're using our legs, and we get that pull on our hips that helps to bring our head and shoulders up very smoothly. And again, in theory, without straining. In practice, we will slip back into old ways of moving, holding ourselves very easily. And we just get used to that in Tai Chi. Oh dear, don't strain against it, and don't sort of push hard against those habits. Whatever else is true about them, they've got you here, so they're not all bad. Yeah. just feel the beginning of that sense of a flow through the upper part of the body. However slight, it doesn't have to be a big movement. When we turn in the center of our body, our hips and waist, we direct the weight more towards one part of the body, towards one leg, the leg that we're moving towards. And this distinction between what is referred to as full and empty in Tai Chi, where the weight is that part of, or the majority of the weight is that part of the body is full, other parts are empty, is one of the very strong motivating powers that create the movement. Turn the other way. So it's the center of the body that we make the change from. Go forwards this time, turn towards the other leg, and then let your hips draw you back into the hip on that side, turn, transfer across to the other side. Just beginning to remember and appreciate the significance of the central part of our body. Remembering always that we are evolutionarily biased, if you like, towards our upper body, arms, hands, brain, and so on and so forth. So to develop and to retain an awareness of what's happening in hips, legs, feet, and the movement of the weight requires a deliberate and conscious effort. Back the other way. And remember, we tend towards what is sometimes referred to as a negative bias. If you bump into somebody on the street and they say, "How you doing?" You say, "Oh, my back's giving me trouble." If they say to you, "How you doing?" you never say something like, "Well, my left leg is really good today." we automatically notice those things because, and again, there are good reasons for that. But try not to let that blinker your appreciation of what's going on in the rest of your body. And then raise one heel, push the foot out, step, make sure of your contact with the floor. And then on the other side. Okay. So back to the basic posture. Just again, review this. Is it going to be comfortable for you? I actually need to go forwards just a little bit, I think. You shuffle around. I'm not stuck in this position. I may change it after a few minutes, but for now, this feels good. Hands at your side. Feel the weight of your arms. Turn your hands palm forwards again. Ease forward, and once more, this little rotation with your arms, and remembering perhaps that included your chest and your upper back. But you're not moving your arms forward and backwards. You're rotating them, but they remain underneath your shoulders. But because your shoulders are moving forward and backwards, because your weight is moving your shoulders, then the position of your hands will change. So it's quite interesting because there's quite a lot of movement here. And yet you're not doing that much with your arm. Just appreciate that movement within your arm, which is a movement that you're going to take, an energy that you're going to take, and create the visible external patterns that we characterize in Tai Chi. So this time, leaving your hands facing back, and now just let them swing through. You drop down slightly and curve up quite naturally, like a imagine a child on a swing. When you push a child on the swing, you don't lift them up like that. You push them forwards, and they naturally go up. And in the same way, arms will quite naturally swing up. As they do that, this trained attention that we're developing by noticing what's going on in our body will start to inform us about things that are happening, small movements, extensions, contractions, and so on and so forth. So trying to maintain an awareness like both inner and outer. This is fisherman casting net. Then this time, once again, you imagine the ball behind your arms. And as you come back, that means you're going to be rolling the ball in. Try and avoid thinking of this in terms of lifting your arm. So the changes between the front and your back. So what happens as you come back, feeling in belly and chest. Next time you get to this position here, turn your hands in, draw your elbows apart, pigeon spread the wing, like going forwards. So still, if you like, the primary source of movement of energy comes from your root and the transfer of your weight. But here we feel also the chest opening, contracting, and as the chest contracts, the back opens up about. More time. Your hands come down in front of your hips, pushing wave. And then pushing back, a hollow fist with both hands, just slightly above your legs, and rotate into palm down as you go forwards, palm up as you come back. This time, don't let your elbow go out, nor should you let your elbow go behind your shoulder. So a fairly limited amount of movement with your arm. If I stop moving my weight, this is all my arm is doing. The angle in my elbow becomes a little bit more shallow, but not thrusting out. I get to there, and if I now move the weight forward, you can see a significant portion, the majority of the movement coming from the transfer of the weight. There's always worth questioning. When I say something like that, just check. The worst that can happen is you find that you're doing it correctly. But whether you're doing it correctly or not, you are still at that point engaging your attention more fully. Do one more of these going forwards. Open your fingers, turn out, and just as you come back, widen your arms in. Trying to maintain that very rhythmic transfer of the weight from front to back to front. Notice how easy it is to lose touch with that, and how when we lose touch with it, we may well stop actually moving the weight. One more time. Turn your hands palm down, turning, going forwards, turning back the other way, and back to the same. Using your hips and pelvis to guide your hands. Polishing the table. Once more. Come back, just rest your hands palm up in your lap. Give yourself a moment once again to sort of come into a good posture, hips sinking back, etc., etc. And then a gentle push down through the feet and hips produces the upward movement to lift your hands, and then again pressing down. Remember, particularly with these vertical movements, but really with all of them, there's always that counterbalancing movement. My hips, my feet gently pushing into the floor and chair to produce the upward movement. Now changing to the wild goose, hands turning out. The image of the bird in flight offers any kind of quality, then that too becomes part of your movement, part of your intent. Maybe, I don't know, the grace, the smoothness of it. I sometimes think of a feather. You get a feather and you have it sort of sideways down, that surface down, and wave it up in the air. We realise that the feather is quite strong, but it yields a little bit to the pressure. So there's a kind of deep sense of conditioning in our body when we work like this, going forwards, parting the clouds, because we're trying to move like the feather. We're trying to move as though we're in water. And you know, if you've been swimming recently and you haven't been for a while, you would have been aching by the time we got out the pool, or certainly by next day. So it's not that we're not using our body, it's just that we're using our body differently. making use of those deeper parts of the body as I sometimes think of them. Not just the skeleton, but tendons and ligaments, muscle, fascia, maybe even the bones themselves. Now, your hands drop down, feel the weight of your arms, and the next expansion coming up, pushing your elbow up, your elbow draws your fingers up, wind around and pull down. Dragon flux to start. Change sides, take your time as you do this, and again. One more time after this one. And then both hands together, pushing in two directions. Take your time to finish each stage. Often the temptation to rush, especially to rush the withdrawing movement. As you push your hands out this time, push one foot out, rest it on your heel, knees still a bit bent. Very gently with this one, it's strong on your back. You may feel a soft stretch in the back of your legs. Hips drop back, drawing on your shoulders. The shoulders draw your arms. It's almost like somebody is sitting behind your chair and they take hold of the belt of your trousers and they pull you back. And as we come back to this position, just remind yourself of that feeling of sitting there when we were doing this. And as you come to your upright position around about here, and you get sitting again into those structures within our body. Your hands drop down this time. Once again, a hollow fist going forwards, angling through your back, grasping the tiger's ears. Again, this is a case of your arms being pulled across, this time by your shoulders, and with that very gentle contraction in the chest. Now try the same things on the other side. And then change into grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. the feet back and just once again sitting and see how this feels now after just spent half an hour exercising, but also half an hour bringing your attention in. So sometimes it can be quite difficult to distinguish whether differences we feel are, if you like, in the mind or whether they're in the body, or that's most likely of all that it's a combination of both of those that have made the difference. And then staying in the chair for a moment, and what we haven't done for a while, just sink your weight back into your right hip, and then forwards with a little bit of a turn into your left leg, and then got back into your left hip and forwards into your right leg. Hands in front of you, so you're carrying the tray of drinks. It's not a big movement of your weight. It's not a full movement of your weight. And after a while, it begins to feel it's almost like what it really is the lengthening to your back. And then next time you go to your left, pushing your right hand up, so you're hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. Turn palm down, come back towards the middle as you go across, and then forwards again and back. Moving your weight and turning your center a little bit. And with the idea that there's the ball coming in, you're going to meet that ball with your hand. Got quite a dynamic feel to it, this exercise. Do one more on each side. And then once again, let your hands rest. I think hitting the ball in front of the shoulder is a really good example of how these various aspects of Tai Chi, these various principles, when they come together into one whole, can produce a very dynamic, quite a strong, energetic quality about it. For all that we're moving very slowly and with the emphasis on softness. Now, once again, before we stand, rubbing your hands together and tapping exercise again. Over your head and neck. Down from one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Upper part of the chest. And your belly. And legs. Rest your hands, pushing your heels up. And the blood circulating back through the muscles of your legs. and then circling around. Okay, and then if you wish to stand, stand. So we want to bring about the same qualities in our body in the standing as in the sitting. Obviously, there's no chair there. So how we go about that has to change. And what we're looking for is a good alignment with the pull of gravity so that the weight of our bodies is allowed to go down through. You know, if I'm standing like say this, twisted around a little bit, or this, then gravity's tending to pull me forwards. Always remember, any changes should be made slowly and gently, never forced on your body. And put the chair next to me like this, and just rocking your weight forwards and backwards in your feet. And noticing when that's going to happen. So if that's if that's something that concerns you, and it's perfectly reasonable, the chair there can help to stabilize you. But even if you're not using the chair for stability, realize we all carry habits, we all carry areas of tightness that we're not aware of. And sometimes I find I'm here, I'm using just the chair for just a little bit of support, and it's like, oh, that's enabled me to let go a little bit in my back, say, or something like that, and I didn't even realize that I was carrying that tightness there. So this isn't just about in case you fall or something like that. It's using a prop to actually help us to investigate more deeply in the body. Having said which, I'm going to move it out of my way now because it's difficult to continue teaching with there, but feel free to continue. And what we're looking for is this positioning for our weight and positioning for our head, where we can find that alignment with the pull of gravity. We'll use the example of this pole. In theory, in practice, it's much more difficult. In theory, I can find a place where the pole will remain upright. I know it doesn't look like it's going to do. It is quite difficult to do. Oops, didn't do it there. A little bit slower that time. Even slower that time. So I was getting closer to that alignment. So here, if I put the pole there, this is what we want to be thinking of. So you see how the pole stays relative to my body in the same position. I'm not doing something like this or this. This is a valuable exercise because as we identify that point of, let's call it equilibrium, I'm trying to avoid the term balance, we're more likely once again to let go, to find that positioning where once again we can get a feeling of sitting. We sit into our legs and hips. We, if you like, sit into our skeleton. One way or another, using whatever image or idea is helping you, just starting to feel that as you stand, you're better supported. And perhaps also aware of what's getting in the way of that. I mean, that is equally useful. This isn't about always having perfect posture. You might think, oh, I'm a bit tight in my leg today, or something like that. And then let your hips drop back a little bit more, sinking down and pushing up. Your body expanding and contracting. So if you could feel your legs being engaged when you're in the chair, you'll be very familiar with the idea of using your legs. Move your body. So there's a subtlety to the chair-based exercise, the subtlety of awareness, really. Bring the hands around as though you're cradling the ball, and as you push up, just let the expansion in your upper body push your elbows out, Turn your hands over as though they're resting on top of the ball and pressing down. Notice that to get the upward expanding movement, there's a feeling of kind of pressure or pushing downwards through your feet. There's always that opposite movement, and it's good to feel that actually when you are beginning to extend out, like a tree putting down roots, you're making a stronger connection to the ground. You're less likely to strain and certainly less likely to become unstable when you're able to do that. Well, I call this exercise rooting down, because when we sink down, obviously our centre of gravity is dropping, but when we push up, it is still dropping, or at least it doesn't come up with us, if you like. Trees are often used as a good image of this. Now, bring the hands out and the wild goose. So again, the image of the bird in flight. Use these images as appropriate. If they resonate with you, remember our bodies naturally respond to imagery anyway. Mind and body are not really as separate as we often assume that they are. And then heart in the clouds. Make sure your hands stay a little bit in front of your body. It's an interesting tendency that I think most of us have, which is when our hands go above our shoulders, we want to lean backwards. If you've ever tried to get something off a shelf or put something on a shelf and found yourself nearly falling backwards, you'll appreciate that. So we keep our arms deliberately a little bit in front of our body. One more time. Give your legs a shake. So moving from the parallel stance to the forward stance, the bow stance, turn one foot out, keep the width of your step and step forwards. So you can see the clear space between my feet from the front, but also from line up with, you can't really see it that clearly, can you? I'll do it this way. I think you'll see it more clearly there. Yeah. So you can see I'm not like this. I've got this. I'm not like this though. It's not a stride. So the stance is roughly square. As you get more experience with this, and some of you may be feeling this, as I allow my hips to settle more, I can get a slightly longer step. But it's never going to be a huge stride, because what we're interested in now is to feel the weight transferring. Before, we talk about weight from hips to feet. Your weight can move, and when your weight moves, you move. And we can see that quite easily. If you're, for instance, if you're sort of handing a heavy box to somebody, if the weight of the box gets too far out there, it'll pull you over. And in the same way, if you're, I know, sometimes you might walk on the pavement, and the pavement is tilted, and that sends your weight in that direction. Well, that can have you over as well. So discovering that we can take some kind of ownership of where the weight goes is actually really important. And so both seated and standing, this is something to really practice. And once again, moving from the ground, pushing yourself along is one way of thinking this. So that rather than doing this, which again can have us forwards, we're maintaining this upright posture. So the interesting thing is, of course, as you can see there, I'm keeping my body reasonably straight. I'm not trying to hold it rigid, maybe a little bit of kind of bending and things like that, because there are no straight lines in the body. Worth noting that actually the habit that we have of sending our shoulders forward is actually quite a useful one. It has its limits, but you know, if you're walking to the shops, you don't. I'm going down the road. I don't do this. You sort of angle forward slightly because that does pull you forward. What we do is we swing the leg forward, so we actually use gravity to help us to move. But of course, you can take that too far, and if you lean too far, that's when we, you know, if we trip over, for instance, then our centre of gravity is too far away, and that's when this posture becomes significant. Again, raising your toes, and this time letting your weight settle back more in your rear leg. I have my foot slightly turned out at this point. Push your back knee forwards and raise your heel. So gradually, more of your weight comes to rest through your supporting leg. So, you know, if you've been to these sessions a lot, which all the people here have, it's very easy to take these things for granted. Oh yeah, we're doing that one again, and you know, part of your attention is like, yeah, I need to go shopping because I mentioned shopping earlier. Maybe that distracted you, or whatever. But it's good to take the time to give this real consideration. And it's good to not have to think about the shopping list as well. So there's that little bit of space in your attention. And then just bring your foot in, push back out, make sure you get it in the right position. The term sometimes used in Tai Chi, and I think it's a bit misleading, is single weighted. What it really means is that the weight can move as we want it to move. So what I don't want to do, for instance, is start to extend that foot and kind of topple over, because then I had to take an extra step. I wasn't planning that. So you step out, when you go forward, you put your heel down, you lower your toes, then you move your weight. One of the reasons we take a shorter step. As you go back, it's the ball of the foot that goes down first, then your heel, then your weight. Sometimes describe it as though you're walking on thin ice. You've got to test the ice before you go. Interestingly, more recently, advice from the NHS during winter, when it starts to get slippery underneath, icy underneath, is to take shorter steps because we're more stable there. I'm not saying we should always do that. I've nothing against practices that encourage to take longer steps as well. It's just not what we're doing here. Now, change over. So have your left foot forwards, if you will, whichever foot wasn't there. Get the width of your step, the length of your step, same idea. Try not to stiffen up in your muscles. Don't tighten, sorry, in your joints. Don't tighten your knee or your ankle or your hip. And you will feel it working more in muscles and tendons and ligaments. So it's a good exercise for conditioning your legs and for taking some of the pressure off joints like your knees while you're in motion. Raising your toes and your hips. So this is an important exercise for us anyway, but it's the foundation for what we're going to be doing in a few moments, and really is one of the key Tai Chi exercises. Very important for our mobility, but also the transfer of the weight, like in the chair, one of the principal energies, if you like to think of it like that moves our body, our upper body and our arms. So stepping in, just check in as you get to here, and then you get to here. Are your hips still level, or have you tilted over? And then step through either forwards or backwards, depending on where you've got the room, trying to maintain the width of your step. change direction. Now have your right foot forwards. Using that movement, going into fisherman castanet. Your arms following, nice sort of wave-like flow through your body. Think back, and this time add one thing in, a turn in the center of your body, turning towards the front leg. And letting that movement swing your arms out. This is wind blows the willows. Good. And then change over. Fisherman castanet. Turn in. Wind blows the willows. Another delightful image, I think, really. That one. This time I'm going to turn my front foot out a little bit, and when I go forwards, let my back heel come up, foot coming in, and step forwards. This is dragonfly skims the water. And again, you can do this in either direction, checking that your hips and shoulders are still level. Maybe just introducing a slight lift in your foot if you're comfortable with that. But that's not the main point of the exercise. It's getting that feeling of your whole body moving as one unit. And when you run out of space in the direction that you're moving in, change in direction. Take your time. And notice I'm going quite slowly, but I'll get to here. I'm just going to go rushing into it. I settle in first. So that sort of sense of a spacious quality in mind and body is, I suppose, in a way, it's put to the test with an exercise like this. So, you know, quite often you'll see me wobbling around doing this. So don't sort of stiffen up. If you're a little wobbling, just give yourself a chance to settle before you carry on. And then bring your feet down. Excellent. Well, that went very quickly. Go back to your chairs. And as always, you know, what we've done is gone from a very simple starting point, which was that awareness of our posture and, you know, trying to find the alignment with the pull of gravity, and using that awareness and that alignment to get that feeling of sitting, really, I would argue, both in mind and body, so that, you know, everything settles together. There's various ways we can describe this in Tai Chi. One of the terms is central equilibrium. And for me, a really good image of central equilibrium is the mountain. Mountains are still, they sort of have deep roots, they don't topple over easily anyway. There's a quietness about them, there's a strength about them, and these are all qualities that I would associate with central equilibrium. So the final exercise, letting your arms drop down. This is Embrace Tiger, return to the mountain. I think this is a good one to finish on. Bring your hands around your leg, holding the ball here, let your elbows drop. That feeling of coming back to the mountain. One of the reasons I like it is because it doesn't assume that we're always there. The tiger is said to represent everyday life, and we get thrown off course very easily, very understandably, I think. But we have the option, the Tai Chi, come back. I think that's really important. So particularly focused on that last movement and that feeling of quietening, that feeling of settling. What are the images and sensations that you would associate with coming back to the mountain? One more time. And rest. Good. And then just open your eyes. As ever, thank you very much, everybody. That went all very, very quickly for me. I don't know how it was for you. That is often the case,
Yes.
though.
Very nice. Thank you very much.